My name is Rick Green, and I'm running for Congress. I live with my wife Maggie and our 3 children, aged 8, 6, and 4, in Pepperell, Massachusetts. And 20 years ago, my brother and I started a company, 1A Auto, selling auto parts online. And most folks who know Pepperell know it's a small town on the New Hampshire border, but what they might not know is for most of the last century, the largest employer in town was a paper mill. So it's a mill town, just like a lot of towns and cities in the Merrimack Valley and throughout the district. And around 15 years ago, when the mill fell on hard times, a lot of folks lost their job. Downtown was hit real hard. But within a few short years, that little company that my brother and I started became the largest employer in town. Now we have locations in Littleton and Westford as well, and we employ over 450 people. So when I tell you I know what it takes to get the economic engine of the 3rd District revving, it's because I've done it. When I tell you I'm going to deliver government that empowers growth and economic opportunity, you can take that to the bank. I'd like your support in this election. I can't do it alone. I'd appreciate it if you'd visit our website, rickgreenforma.com, or also visit us and like us on Facebook at Rick Green for Congress. Thank you very much, and I hope to get your support.
So welcome to the Sun today.
All right, thanks for having me. My pleasure.
Take it away.
I'm Rick Green. I'm from Pepperell, where I grew up, and I went to school in the public schools. I lived there with my wife, Maggie, our 3 children, ages 8, 6, and 4, and I'm running for Congress. About 20 years ago, my brother and I started a company, 1A Auto, just a small company, started in the corner of a garage, selling auto parts online. And a lot of folks know Pepperell as a small town on the New Hampshire border, which it is, but it's also a mill town. And for most of the last century, the paper mill was the largest employer in town. And when the mill fell in hard times, a lot of folks lost their jobs. Downtown was hit hard, but within a few short years, that little company that my brother and I started became the largest employer in town. So when I tell you I know what it takes to get the economic engine of the 3rd District revving, it's because I've done it. That little company now has locations also in Littleton and Westford. We employ over 450 people, and that's why I'm running for Congress. My business has been successful because I empower my customers. We have over 5,000 YouTube videos where we actually show our customers how to install the parts that we're selling. And that's what I think Congress should do. It needs to empower the people. There's no problems that the American people can't solve. Sometimes government just gets in their way. But thank you for having me here today. It's great.
Right. Just a little bit more about your business. So you sell auto parts, right?
That's right.
And then you have YouTube videos where you tell people how to install them?
Yeah, that's correct. Actually, I mean that's the real reason why we're successful.
Yeah.
We sell to what I like to call the first-time DIYer, maybe somebody who's handy around the house. They have tools. They go to Home Depot, but they might think their car's a little bit too difficult to do a repair on. The company's 1A Auto. If you go to YouTube and just look for 1A Auto, you'll literally find thousands of videos where we actually show you how to do the repair. So if you're buying the part from us, in addition to the part, you get a link to the website or the YouTube video where it shows you exactly how to do the installation.
Rick, how many members of Congress, out of the 535 members of Congress and the 9 people in the Massachusetts delegation, how many do you think have ever changed the oil in their car or fixed a flat tire?
Honestly, I haven't done that survey. I can tell you when I get there will be at least one who has. But other than that, I wouldn't know. I'm sure there's more than a few.
It used to be easy, but the manufacturers don't make it easy anymore.
Again, that's where the videos come in. We make it easy. They may not make it easy, but we do.
The point is that some people, including myself, have the impression that Congress has become so detached from reality and the people and what takes place every day, the common struggles, the victories, the defeats that people go through every day. What's your thoughts on that?
No, actually, you're 100% right. I mean, that's what we're hearing out on the trail. I think a lot of folks are they're wondering, how does the government impact me in my day-to-day life, especially the federal government? I mean, folks just don't see it. They feel a real detachment from the elected officials, and the reason is because they just don't understand what are you doing that impacts me. All they see down in D.C. is fighting. And that's why we're talking about fixing, not fighting. We're talking about infrastructure and jobs, because those are things people see in their day-to-day life. I mean, folks want jobs. If they've got a job, they want a better job. And you drive around the district, infrastructure, bridges. Massachusetts is ranked 50 out of 50 states in terms of functionally obsolete bridges. Our infrastructure here is old, and that's the government's job. That's the government's job. Taking care of the roads and bridges.
You talked about the fighting in Congress. And my boss has mentioned this a few times. It seems that if the Republicans bring something up, the Democrats defeat it or try to block it, and vice versa. What do you attribute as the root cause of that, and how would you try to fix it?
Yeah, I think politics has become kind of a spectator sport, you know, and it's you have the polls, which is kind of like your regular season, and everybody's watching, and there's all kinds of political reasons and partisan reasons to do this and do that. I want to get back to a politics of the people, doing what's right for the people, doing things they can see in their everyday life. And again, like I said, it's about, for me, it's about jobs, infrastructure, opiates. Those are things where, you know, when I make a difference in Congress, folks are going to understand, you know, what their representative is doing and how it impacts them.
So how do you, a Republican running in what has been traditionally a Democratic district, how do you buck that trend? I mean, and are you surprised that you're the only Republican running for an open seat in the 3rd Congressional District?
Well, so two questions. I'll take the second one first. I'm not surprised that I'm the only one. You know, when you have a candidate, I think, is of my caliber, as good as I am, then a lot of folks tend to get behind that candidate. You know, when the seat opened up, I talked to everybody who I thought might run for the race, and I asked them to get behind me, you know, and they all did. So I think you're seeing a lot of unity on the Republican side, and you know, I'm just thrilled that people decided to back me. You know, in terms of, you know, how does a Republican win the seat? You know, for me, it's all about basics, right? At the end of the day, I just need to get more votes, right? And if I get more votes, I win the election. Our message, I think, resonates more. I think I have a better story than my opponents to tell. A businessman kind of, you know, built something from nothing, created jobs from the districts, lived here, went to school here. My kids are in public schools here. You know, I really think I can relate to the folks. And that message is resonating with the folks we're talking to, day in and day out.
But in all due respect, there are several of the Democratic candidates who formed their own businesses and whose kids went to local schools. Littlefield, there's the sock guy, there's, who else? There's a bunch of businessmen.
Beach.
In Beach.
Yeah, well, I mean, you say a bunch, but you only named two.
Well, no, I just named 4.
So, well, look, at the end, I think those folks haven't had the success that I've had. I mean, if you look at the business we've built, you know, creating 450 jobs, doing it the way we did it. So I started my company in the dot-com boom, right? Most of those companies are all gone, but we persevered, we survived, we created jobs. And again, it's the way we did it. Empowering our customers, you know, giving the power to them, really listening to our customers. I mean, my business is a customer service business. I don't succeed unless I make my customers successful, and that's what I'm going to bring to the people of the 3rd District. I'm not going to succeed as a congressman unless they're successful.
Now you've lived in, how long have you lived in the district, Pepperell? How long have you lived in Pepperell?
So my family moved there in '84. You know, other than going away to college and a few years after that, you know, I've been there. We started the business in roughly 2000. I've been here full-time since then.
Okay. So, what, and I don't want to hop on this is my last question about the Democrats, but what is your impression of people who don't even live in the district and they're running on the Democratic side for this nomination, and they say if they win, they'll move into the district or whatever? What is that?
Look, it's a free country, and I think it's fantastic that so many people are taking an interest in the political process. But again, I think that the folks of this district in particular want someone who understands them, who gets their day-to-day, you know, struggles. And I think they're going to see that in myself, you know, someone who's from here, who's lived here most of my life, you know, built a business here, built a family. You know, I didn't choose to come here to hold public office. You know, I chose to come here to raise my family. I chose to come here to run my business. You know, and I think those reasons will resonate with folks more than, you know, someone who's from out of the district.
Okay. One of the issues that we talk about and has come up with all the candidates is healthcare. Okay, what to do about the rising costs and everything. And of course, most of the other candidates that we talked to on the Democrat side, they believe that the Affordable Care Act should stay intact, maybe tweak it. Now, you're a business owner, you employ 400 people. Do they have health care? Is it company health care?
They do, yes.
Okay, so you know what it is to meet those bills.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, we self-insure. So I know.
So what does that do? What do you mean self-insure?
So I mean, self-insure means like the company's writing a check to cover the actual costs. We're using a health insurance company to help us negotiate the cost, but we're actually writing a check every month to cover all the different, procedures or checkups or whatever it may be that our employees have. So I think more so than most, we're exposed to all the costs.
Okay, so how has that healthcare bill impacted your company? Good, bad, and what would you do to change it now that you've seen it and it went into effect in 2010, I believe.
Yeah.
So what's it been like?
So before the bill, for the 10 years roughly before the bill, we were able to maintain costs, kind of low single-digit increases every year. And since the bill, it's been double digits, sometimes, upper 20, 30% cost increase. So, it's done nothing to control costs. If anything, they've skyrocketed under the particular bill. But I don't think it's necessarily, talking about the specific bill. I think it's more talking about healthcare in general and what I would do there. But we need to reintroduce the price mechanism. So I talk about healthcare. I ask folks, what's the cost of a gallon of milk? Anybody?
$2.67 a gallon.
We don't drink that much.
Okay, so
is that gasoline?
yeah, that's my next question. So you've heard the question. So how much? So how much does it cost for a gallon of gas? But how much does it cost for a gallon of flu vaccine at retail?
No idea.
Yeah, no one has any idea. And what does it cost? When you go to your doctor for a checkup. Right. Most folks don't know. They might know what the copay is. But they don't actually know what either the procedure or the visit or whatever they're getting. They're not aware of the cost anymore. And I liken it to auto parts. Again, this is my business. I know this very well. But in the auto insurance, which you have to drive a car, there's two different ways that you can get your insurance. One is kind of the network referral. So you sign up with an insurance company, you're in an accident, and they say if you take it to our in-network providers, they'll take care of it. Right? You bring your car there. Say someone backed into you in a parking lot, knocked out your taillight, your bumper, and we'll handle it. Go to our in-network folks, and that's kind of the way healthcare is set up now. So you don't see what's going on. You don't actually see the pricing. But then there's another method where they'll say we can send out an adjuster. An adjuster will come out and say, okay, they'll look at the damage to your car and say, taillight, the rear end, I think it's about $1,200 in damage. Now you can still go to one of our in-network folks. We're going to write you this check. You just sign it over to them. They'll handle everything. Or you can do it yourself. Well, these folks are my customers, right? So they're looking at it, they get on my website, and they put all the parts together. So I can buy the parts for $350, and 1A Auto, Rick's company, they have the videos. I can install this myself, and then I get to pocket the difference. Or maybe they're not that entrepreneurial, but they decide, they like to shop. So they go around to a couple different folks, and the in-network guy says, yeah, we'll do it for $1,200, no problem. Take it today. But the guy next door says, you're going to pay me in cash? I'll do it for $1,100, and you get to pocket the $100. So, but just by introducing that price mechanism, giving the consumer choice, okay, that creates a market and that controls costs. In healthcare specifically, you look at things like eye surgery or a lot of the plastic surgeries that no plans cover. The quality of these procedures continues to go up and the cost keeps coming down. All right, because you have doctors performing this procedure that they have to satisfy the market. They've got to give choice to the consumers. And they've got to satisfy the consumer if they want to stay in business. And that works to control prices. So reintroducing that price mechanism, I think, is the number one way to control costs. So we've got to give more choices to consumers. So, how does that look in terms of policy? We need to mandate that doctors and healthcare providers are providing a list of services and providing the costs. So folks
more transparency.
Exactly. More transparency. So that's how you have a market. You have to have market transparency. You have to have price transparency. And giving the consumers choice. Ultimately, that choice, is what's going to bring the cost in line.
Chris?
Speaking of healthcare, how would you have voted last year when the House voted on the House version of a new healthcare bill that was ultimately defeated in the Senate? I think that was last May. Would you have voted in favor for that bill or against it?
Quite honestly, I didn't read that bill, and if I haven't read a bill, I don't want to comment on how I would have done in terms of specific votes. But again, with healthcare, what I would have done had I been there for sure is I would have pushed for price transparency. I would have pushed for consumer choice. Those are principles that I would have pushed to get in that bill. To my knowledge, that wasn't what the bill focused on. So that would have been my focus, is getting those tenets into the bill or any bill that I'll work in while I'm in Congress.
On another high-profile issue, following the shooting in Florida, there have been calls for stricter gun regulations, but both the Speaker of the House and the Senate President have refused to bring measures to the floor. What would you like to see done in terms of more regulations on guns, and particularly semi-automatic rifles? And
Sure. So, look, first and foremost, the safety of our children is a shared responsibility. It's not a political issue. It's not a partisan issue. We all have to keep our children safe, and that's paramount. So anything, and I mean absolutely anything, that we need to do to keep our children safe is on the table, so long as we're not infringing on the constitutional rights of law-abiding citizens. Okay, so what does that mean? So let's look at gun violence in the whole. 2/3 of gun deaths are suicides. Okay, then you also have this incident that happened in Winchester recently. This troubled young man in the library murdered a young woman with a knife. Okay, so you look at the suicides, you look at some of these other incidents, and the root cause here is mental health. And there are some folks who shouldn't have any weapon. And for me, again, the principle is, what are we doing to make sure the folks who shouldn't have weapons, who are a danger, honestly, to themselves as well as to others, make sure they're not in a position to hurt anyone. And those are the folks we need to be looking after. We need to be helping those folks. We need to help them so they can live better lives, more productive lives. Let the law-abiding citizens. You don't usually get anywhere by restricting the rights of law-abiding citizens.
So I heard the Second Amendment there. So would you oppose stricter measures?
So, well, another thing is, I'm against.
No, I'm not sure I got an answer to the question.
Fine,
Yeah.
but I'm against one-size-fits-all solutions coming out of Washington. They rarely work. I think that we have laws here in Massachusetts. They work for our state. They work very well. I think most folks are happy with the laws we have in this state. But I'm not sure the folks in Texas would agree with our laws, and I'm not sure it's right that we should enforce our laws on Texas, just like it's absolutely, I wouldn't want someone from Texas enforcing their view on us. I think it was Justice Brandeis who said that the states are the laboratory of democracy. I think we have 50 states, and I think they should all deal with this in the way that they see works best for their state, and then other states should be able to learn from states that work the best.
So,
but should civilians have the right to buy weapons that are only used by military personnel? I mean, do you think that? Why would someone go hunt with an AK-47? I mean, it just. And I know the point where you're saying, okay.
Well, and again, but so when you take these extreme cases, and both sides like to do this, you like to take the extreme case. Right, but that's why we have the problems we have down in D.C. is when both sides are taking the extreme case. There's nobody in the middle talking about how we fix issues and how we get things done. So, I like to start from a place where we get a lot of folks agreeing, and that's where you get down to work and you start doing things. You can actually get things accomplished. So if you get into individual, items or weapons, then it's always where do you draw the line? Okay, but again, you're basically going into two camps and you're pushing people to the extremes. I want to bring folks together and figure out where we can all agree, and that's when we start to go to work.
What about mandatory background checks?
Well, again, and I point to Massachusetts. I think that what we have here in Massachusetts works very well for our state, and I support what's being done in Massachusetts, and I think you keep that here in Massachusetts. But again, I don't want to one size fits all from D.C. I'm not going to tell someone in Texas or Wyoming, where you have a more rural population. It's a different. Here we have a more urban population. We're living closer together. Versus a state like Wyoming where folks are living much further apart. It's a different style of life, and I don't want to tell those folks how to live their life.
So I want to get back to the assault rifles because I don't think you've answered the question. So
yeah, but
let me finish.
Yeah.
So in your view, then, is that a states' rights issue and not an issue for the federal government?
I think that the easier way to boil this down, honestly, the simplest way to boil this down would be, you make a point about not having one size fits all. Do you think there is anything more the federal government should be doing to regulate guns or firearms, or do you think the federal government is where it should be and everything should be up to the states?
Again, we say everything should be up to the states. I mean, we're pushing it, to side. By and large, I do believe the federal government is where it should be, and I would leave it, by and large, to the states again, as the laboratories of democracy to sort out what works best. Look, government that's closest to the people usually works best, almost always works best. And the states are closer to this than the federal government. You know, it's in all these incidents, it's state authorities that are responding. It's not federal authorities. They're coming in much later. So it's really the states have to decide what works best for their population.
A former justice of the Supreme Court had a piece in the New York Times a few weeks ago that we did a story on, urging a repeal of the Second Amendment. How do you feel about that?
Look, I support the Second Amendment. I support the First Amendment in terms of freedom of speech, freedom of religion. I support the entire Bill of Rights. I think we're going way too far.
Just one last thing on this gun issue. So if we leave it up to every state, okay, to do mandatory background checks, or you know, to make that decision, because I could see that coming up in federal legislation. You know, everybody in Congress has to vote on mandatory background checks at some point. All right. So a family from Massachusetts could go to Wyoming, and someone could slaughter that whole family, and yet if there was a simple background check that might determine that he was mentally or she was mentally unfit to carry a gun. So in that blanket thing about mandatory background checks, which seems to work well in Massachusetts, how would you vote on that for a mandatory background check for anybody who buys a gun? Because I don't know how they would find out that someone might not be unfit to carry a gun, especially with HIPAA laws and everything else. So if I just put to you, you know, Congressman Jim Campanini has a bill and it's going to come for a vote, thank God, they're actually going to vote on something in Congress, and it says yes or no, I'm for mandatory background checks or opposed. How would you vote, yes or no?
Again, so I'd have to look at the specific bill, all right? And like I said before at the outset, everything that's going to increase the safety of our children is on the table, so long as it doesn't infringe on the rights, constitutional rights of law-abiding citizens. If something comes across, and I feel it does those two things, it doesn't infringe on law-abiding citizens' rights, and it's increasing the safety of our children, I'm absolutely going to be for it. Plain and simple.
This morning, the president turned up his rhetoric on Twitter again on sanctuary cities. So, do you agree with his view on sanctuary cities? And how do you view that issue?
Yeah, so I haven't seen his morning.
Well,
Twitter.
maybe you did, but I mean how he views sanctuary cities.
Yeah, look, this is one of many differences between myself and my competition. I'm against sanctuary cities. The bigger issue for me is rule of law. We all have to agree that rule of law is paramount. You can't have one level of government coming out and basically saying, we're not going to abide by what the federal government does on immigration, which is a federal issue. So the thing here is, for the general populace, I believe there's really two principles: certainty and humanity. So certainty is return to the rule of law. Everyone needs to understand, whether you're a citizen, a legal resident, or you're here, outside of the law. You need to understand what the law is, and how you come into compliance with it. And that's the humanity side of it. We've got a lot of folks here. This issue's been a political football for 20 years. For me, it's very personal. My brother-in-law is a citizen. He's a naturalized citizen. As a matter of fact, it's a great quick story. He came here shortly after 9/11 on a work visa, and his job evaporated. And I met him back when the company was tiny, and he was getting like his PhD in the microeconomic theory of internet transactions. And I told him, I said, I can hardly afford to pay you anything, but I need to have you working for my company. And he's like, that's great. He's like, to stay in the country, I need a job. And friendship was born. And he was here, and he didn't have a place to go for Thanksgiving, so I invited him to Thanksgiving. That's where he met my sister. Now I have 3 beautiful nieces and a nephew, and he's a member of my family. So it's a personal issue for me. So when you talk about the humanity of it, these folks were here. Many of them came here. They thought they might be doing the right thing. They didn't know the laws have changed. It's a slippery slope, and the ground is kind of shifting underneath them. Once we return to rule of law, then we explain to these folks, look, this is what you have to do to come into compliance. This is what you have to do, to live within the law. But the most important thing is we've got to put those people who did it the right way, like my brother-in-law, spent years, went through all the different hurdles and trials and filled out all the paperwork. Those folks have to be in the front of the line. And the folks who are outside the law, we got to give them a path. It has to be humane. We're a humane people, a humane country. Give them a path to come into compliance, but they've got to get in the back of the line, behind the folks who did it the right way.
Just talk, you use the word humane there a couple times, so just a couple quick questions. There's been numerous stories where the government has thrown out of the country law-abiding, productive citizens who pay taxes to the government for 20 or 30 years. They're married, they have families, and they've shipped them back to Mexico, to Guatemala, wherever it was that they came from.
Deported.
Yes, yes. Okay. We can say ship too. So how do you view that?
Yeah, so again, the way I look at it is you've got to give these folks a path. Now, first thing, return to rule of law. We all have to agree, here's the existing law. All right, we're going to abide by it. Once we agree to that, then we can talk about, do we want to change the law? Okay, change the law to treat people differently. But first, return to rule of law. You take the individual, obviously can't speak to an individual case if I don't know the individuals. But, create a path so that folks understand this is what you have to do to comply with the law. And there should be some kind of time, it shouldn't just be like, okay, you're here, it's wrong. If you haven't committed a crime, if you haven't done anything, other than be here outside the law in terms of your immigration status, you shouldn't be getting a first-class ticket out of the country, okay? But if you're a member of a gang, okay, or you're dealing drugs or something like that,
no one's arguing
you're on the first ship out of it.
Why don't you ask your immigration question about it? In the eyes of Rick Green, what is the
No, I wanted to ask about the same question that we've asked all the candidates on DACA. Okay, a couple of months ago, President Trump was in a room with Democrats and Republicans, and he offered them a choice. He says, "I'll sign off right now on the 700,000 or 800,000 dreamers." He says, "We'll bring them right into the country, give them a pathway to citizenship." He says, "But I want my wall." So he says, "I'm here to deal." Okay, now whether it was just the cameras or what, but still, okay. So you're in that room, and he wants someone to pledge, and we'll get this thing done right now. All the cameras are whirring and everything else. Rick Green's in that room, okay, on the Republican side, you get your Democrat cohorts. Was that a good compromise, and how would you vote? Would you say, hey, you know what, okay, let's build the wall, let's give these 700, 800,000 dreamers the opportunity that, whether they deserve it or not, so.
Yeah, so I mean, the dreamers are, the folks I'm talking about, folks who came here outside of the law. And in their specific case, I mean, they were brought here by somebody else, so they didn't even make a decision. It wasn't their choice. And the reality is, that's how government works. You never get everything you want, right? But when you see a good deal and you can get something that's good for the folks in your district, then you take it, right? And I believe, if I look at this, look, I wasn't there, I didn't have a seat at the table, so it's impossible to say exactly, because I'm not exactly entirely sure what was on the table. That being said, I mean, here you have a chance for both sides to work together. Both sides are getting a lot of what they want, but not everything. They're having to give up a little bit. I would have worked, looking at that framework, I would have done everything in my power to bring as many folks in the center as possible together to try and get that deal done. Because I think there was, everybody was winning to a certain degree, but everyone was giving up a little bit. But again, we were moving the issue forward. Nothing's getting done. Again, both sides have camped out in the extremes, and nothing's getting done. Here you had a chance to actually move move a bill forward, accomplish something. Yeah, I would have worked for it.
Okay, when you're out on the campaign trail in the 3rd District, okay, are people talking about immigration? Are they talking about abortion? Are they talking about NAFTA? NAFTA. I mean, you mentioned pocketbook issues when you're creating jobs. I mean, what are they telling you, and what are their concerns? I mean, do these things just come up during elections because there's extremes on both sides? I mean, but the vast amount of people, they're not getting up in the morning and saying, "Gee, did you see that immigration bill?" I mean, what are they telling you?
Yeah, no, it's interesting. As someone who generally, I used to listen to the news cycle, and you're out there on the campaign trail, and you're up early in the morning, you're home late at night, and if I get home early, I'm spending time with my kids and my family. I'm not watching. I'm literally not watching the news. So in a way, I'm living closer to folks who don't pay attention to that stuff. And I got to tell you, that's most folks. Folks are worried about what's going on in their day-to-day life. Folks are worried about jobs. I mean, jobs is always a huge issue, and the folks who have jobs, they want to make sure there's going to be better jobs. They want to make sure there's going to be jobs for their kids. And then infrastructure. You just drive down any road. I've said I'm going to fix the Rourke Bridge in Lowell. We're absolutely going to get that done. I want to be on the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee when I'm in the House. we're going to get that done. The Route 2 Rotary in Concord, I'm sure everyone's been on it at some point. It's almost like it's a rite of passage as a young person to drive. If you can't learn to drive, we're going to fix that.
But some people say even the Egyptians couldn't solve that problem. The ancient Egyptians who built the pyramids, who were brilliant. They say
Well, they couldn't do a rope bridge?
No, the Rotary in Concord.
They told me I couldn't build my business into what I did. Watch me.
It seems to me that the federal government would be more effective coming up with some regulation on these assault rifles and leave the bridge to the states.
Look, in theory and principle, absolutely, I agree with you 100%. The problem is that's not the way it's set up currently. Okay, so you got short term and long term. In the long term, I do want to move more power to the states. I want to move more power to the local officials. Again, I believe government that's closest to the people is best suited to handle the people's problems because they know the people. But you look at the way the government is organized. The government is organized, the federal government, on a Depression-era 1930s model where for every problem we have a program. Okay, so you've got all these different programs: program for housing, program for building bridges, but program for the environment. And over the year, the law's been built up, and all of these things have a bite of the apple before you can get something done. Okay, long term, yes, we need to move more power to the states, but that's not going to happen overnight, right? So in order to make my promise, in the interim, I have to cut through what's already down there and make stuff work. So until they can move the power to the states, so they have the power to get this done, they have the funds. There's still a role at the federal level for someone to cut through the red tape.
We can see that with the bridge program in Lowell. They're getting federal funds and Tiger grants to fix those.
Well, they did, but
Yeah.
that was just an observation of mine, Chris.
I can shift to a different topic if you guys are
that's
set
fine.
with this. I want to talk a little bit about the tax bill. Specifically, I think that I recall a press release that 1A Auto had given out bonuses to employees in the wake of that. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Could you talk a little bit about what exactly you guys did and how that program worked?
Sure. So, and again, so my experience with the tax bill is as a businessman with my own company. We looked at this when the new tax tables came out. Of my employees, everyone got an increase in their take-home pay. The average increase was somewhere around 4%. The biggest increase actually went to single mothers. I had a couple single mothers getting double digits, over 10% increases with the child tax credit that was part of the bill. So that was the impact. And then we looked at the overall impact to our business. And we have to understand about businesses. So on the internet, I have literally hundreds of competitors. All right, so they all got the tax cut. And at the end of the day, if I gave all the money, so if I took all the savings and I raised my employees' pay, which would be a great thing for my employees, I'd love to be able to do that. All right, but the reality is, if I've got 100 other folks and they all decided they're going to take that savings and lower their price, I'm going to lose. I'm going to be out of business. So the main mechanism of the tax decrease to corporations is going to be lower prices to customers. Now, the price mechanism, while it's some said that the capitalism is the worst system that we have that works, or something like that. I always quote it wrong, but I get it close. But the point is, so it's not perfect. Nothing is, and the price mechanism is just like that. So the price it's not overnight. We certainly didn't lower all of our prices overnight. My competitors didn't lower their prices overnight. It'll take time, right? So it'll probably take 6 to 12 months for that to filter in. A lot of people will hold back a little bit because you don't know exactly what the impact is until you see your taxes next year to see what a whole impact of this whole year was. But we're already seeing prices come down in our market because of it. But there at the outset, you have kind of this initial window when you're getting savings. You can roughly estimate about how much it will be. Eventually most of it's going to go to price decreases. But in that initial window, I wanted to share some with my employees. And that's what we did. And that's what when we saw, but I wasn't the first to do it. We saw other companies doing it. But that's why I've been successful, is when I see folks doing something that makes sense, that works for their folks. There's no pride of authorship here. If it works for my folks, then I do it. So I saw that happening. I saw an opportunity to share some of those initial savings with my employees, and we did it.
What were the exact details of it? Was it a flat bonus across the board, or was it scaled to experience or level in the company?
It was pretty flat. We wanted to do something that was not pretty flat. It was flat. I mean, it was just.
And it was 1,000 each. Is that right, or was it a different figure? I might be mixing it up with a different company.
Yeah, we didn't. The company didn't publicly release that, so it's.
Would you tell us what the figure is? How much your employees benefited from this tax bill that you praised?
It was $250. So
every employee got $250?
Yes.
I'd take $250.
Yeah, pretty good.
Got a question?
Yeah, well, going back to that, we talked a little bit. I said, what people have been talking to you about on the campaign trail. You talked a little about the infrastructure and the jobs. What about education? Does that come up?
It doesn't. The other thing that comes up, actually, the things that comes up the most is opiates. Opiates is by and large. It started out. You have an idea, I think, of what will be big issues. When you start, at least that's what I think. Here's what I think people will be talking about. And then you go out there in the real world. It's just like with your customers, right? You have an idea of what you think your customers want, and then if you're lucky, you get close, and then they'll tell you very loudly, where you're wrong. And the thing we heard loud and clear, literally from the outset, from virtually every group we went to, was opiates. It affects everyone. It doesn't care what you look like. It doesn't care how much money you make. It doesn't care where you live. It's in the cities. It's in the towns. It's everywhere. And so that's the biggest issue that didn't start out, maybe in our top three, that worked its way there very quickly.
Any thoughts on the opioid epidemic, and have you come up with a plan at all? Or we saw the other day with Rufus Gifford's plan and stuff. But any thoughts on?
Absolutely. I'm going to be the best on this issue. I've met with more folks on this issue. I may have met with as many groups, community groups. People dealing with it, first responders, folks at Trinity EMS and others, as all the other candidates combined. And again, the reason is I won't say what I'm going to do unless I've learned as much as I could about an issue. With this issue, what really amazed me was I said, okay, again, no pride of authorship here. What's everybody else doing? So I wanted to look and see what are the other members of our congressional delegation doing. And what jumped out at me first was no one has actually committed a staff member to this issue. Now, everyone's talking about the issue, everyone's coming up with their plans, but without someone who's actually responsible and accountable, how are you going to get this done? So the number one thing that I'm talking about that we're going to do is I'm going to have a senior, so I get 17 members of my staff as a congressman. I was blown away by that. I have 450 employees working for me, and I don't have that many people reporting to me directly, but I get 17 staff members. This is the number one issue. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to appoint a senior staff member whose only job is going to be to coordinate the efforts within the district, and we'll help around the state, because this issue knows no boundaries, and my folks won't either. But they're going to be in charge of it. They're going to be responsible. They're going to be accountable. And we're going to coordinate the different groups. So many different groups doing so many good things, but they're not talking to each other. They don't have the wherewithal, the means necessarily, just to share best practices. They're starting to do it a little bit where they can, but when they're taking time out of their day, to go meet with other folks, they're not fighting the epidemic. You have so many people passionate about fighting this epidemic and doing such a great job. Many of them touched by it personally. Myself at my company, 450 employees. In the last year, we lost 2 folks to substance abuse. One person, it was a relapse, and this person had been clean for years before they worked for us. They had worked for us for years, and then they relapse. You never know why it happens. But when it does happen, whether it's a family issue or a job, employment issue, you don't go back and just take a little bit. You go back and use wherever you left off. And the problem is, for this person, it might have been 6-7 years, and the dose you used 6-7 years ago, today it kills you. And it's horrible what's going on. But that's the other thing, at the federal level, interdiction. But back to the question, we're going to have someone, senior staff member, and ultimately myself. I want to be able to look everyone in this district in the eye and tell them, I made you a promise that we're going to do something about opiates. We went to work day one. Right now in my campaign, we're actually already organized. We have a young man whose job is essentially to find all the different community groups, everyone who's doing something about the crisis, and to make sure I go out and meet those folks. Literally, I want to meet every group that's trying to address this issue between now and the election.
But what about pharmaceutical companies? What about doctors who overprescribe opiates? It's great to appoint someone to try to coordinate all these efforts.
Absolutely.
But can you give us something concrete that you would do as a congressman to get at the root cause? And 2 of the root causes are doctors who overprescribe, and law enforcement professionals will tell you this, and pharmaceutical companies.
Okay, so
have a grip on Congress.
But you're downplaying the role as an executive, as again someone who knows how to get things done. I think you're downplaying the role of actually putting someone in charge, making them responsible and accountable.
No, I think
It's
you know,
huge. It actually is.
I applaud you for that.
That's the biggest thing. That's going to make more things happen faster than any of these plans that, anybody can put a plan on a whiteboard, okay? It doesn't make anything happen. Putting somebody in charge and holding them accountable, stuff starts happening very fast. That being said, it's still a fair question. So in Middlesex County, I found this out on the trail. You find a lot of these things. You go to all these different groups. Middlesex County, which roughly approximates the number of folks in the 3rd district. I mean, it's not exact. We don't cover the whole Middlesex County. We have parts of Worcester and Essex, but it's roughly similar. 500,000 prescriptions written for opioids last year. Okay, there's roughly 500,000 registered voters in the district. That means that everybody got written. Everybody in this room got written a prescription for opioids last year. I mean, that's crazy, right? With those kind of numbers, there's definitely stuff going on that shouldn't be happening. So yes, I agree. You look at what the governor did. Governor Baker, working with the legislature, they passed a law. I think they reduced it from a 30-day supply to a 7-day supply. There's a lot. Again,
I think he thinks it should be a 3-day supply. Didn't he say that?
Well, there was
you have to be careful here. I mean, again, you go back to healthcare and customer choice, and it's doctors and patients making the right decisions. So you have to be careful here because the doctors ultimately need to be in charge. But I do think as a society it's right, and what we've done here in the state is right to look at it and say, do we need 30 days? Can we get along with 7? Some people will fight for 3. And there still has to be a way for doctors to say, this person actually needs this for more, for longer, and leave the doctors and the patients in charge. But so I like what the governor did here. I also think interdiction. Okay, so you look at this problem at the federal level. What are we doing to stop the fentanyl and heroin and that's coming to the country illegally? Because a lot of folks get started with prescriptions, okay, but then they move on to the street drugs and the illicit drugs that they obtain illegally. At the federal level, the interdiction is the biggest thing. Now here again, I think I know I bring unique skills to the table. Essentially, the drug business is a business. All right, it's an illegal business, but it's a business. All right, not only is it a business, it's a logistics business, a distribution business. My company, I'm in logistics and distribution. The mayor of Lawrence and the president like to get in little Twitter battles about Lawrence. All right, but let's look at Lawrence. Okay, why is Lawrence? I mean, Lawrence is the hub. Okay, in New England, right? But why? Why is it? All right. First of all, it's centrally located. Right. And you've got 93, you've got 495, you've got 95 right there. Okay, so I have easy access to distribution points. All right, and there's other things too. You have a population that a large portion English is not their first language. Okay, and they may not feel comfortable talking to law enforcement. All right, and they may be willing to work for someone who's paying cash. All right, so that is a piece of it. All right, but it's one small piece of it. But if you want to attack this, you need someone who understands the business and who understands how to attack the business part of it so that you can reduce the distribution.
Okay. I've got one other question, but these guys were getting close to an hour. So.
Well, it seems that the thing that's missing now in this opioid epidemic is getting these people who want second chances enough treatment. Okay, there's really no vehicle right now. The Governor Baker, that's one of the things, he wanted people who were revived by Narcan, the mandate that they go into a treatment program for at least 72 hours. Now the experts said 72 hours isn't really going to do anything, and then legal experts said you can't, civil rights, that you just can't say. But they have done the, civil commitments in the past. People who are going to harm themselves or whatever. It's a very long process, drawn out. So it seems like that's the thing that, we're given this Narcan and everybody's looking upon as a miracle drug, but no, it's not. It's just saving a life until they do it again and again. And now, I wrote about this last week that, the fund ran dry, although the state attorney general just put another $300,000 from a lawsuit that she had won, which was commendable. But it seems like, there's no dedicated funding for Narcan. There's no really mechanism to get these people the treatment they deserve. It's going to come at a cost.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, any thoughts on that and talking to your experts?
Sure. So treatment works. First and foremost, meet with all these different groups. Treatment absolutely works. As a matter of fact, the statistics show that it doesn't matter. There's a very small difference in terms of whether you decide, like it's time, and you check yourself into a treatment program, or you're forcibly committed there for some reason, or maybe you're given the option between, if you've committed some kind of offense and you're given the option between treatment. Even folks who are forced into treatment don't necessarily go there willingly, their success rate is almost as high, so treatment works. So
why aren't there enough beds? Supply and demand. Right now, there's a big demand for this, and yet why isn't the supply increasing?
It's again, you go back to how our social services are delivered. They're still delivered on this 1930s Depression era model. So if you've got someone, look at John Ratko with Veterans Northeast Outreach Center up in Haverhill and what they're doing. It starts with housing, right? Get these folks safe, right? Then from there, you bring the services to them. So you look at this, the old model was, you have a program for, in the veterans case, you have a program for job training, you have a program for housing, you have a program for health care, you have a program for food, for transportation, all these different programs. I mean, it's a 50-hour-a-week job, just to keep up with this, right? And what we have to get over is we have to get away from programs and back to people, right? So we need government but we need government services that treat people, people, not programs. And it does start with housing. And it's a little bit counterintuitive because it's almost like it's like a benefits surge, specifically with the opiates. It doesn't. You go in for 30 days and then you're forced out, maybe because your benefits run out. It's not long enough. The opiates aren't. Their impact on the brain hasn't stopped, and you're taking somebody who's at a real vulnerable point, at 30 days, and you're putting them right back out into whatever environment they came from. The treatment that works is they've got to have stable housing. It can be 12 to 18 months. And it has to be a graduated service. So if you get a job, a lot of federal programs, you get a job, but they're means tested, bang, you lose it. And that needs to change. We need to say, okay, you got a job, right now you can pay some rent. You can bear part of the burden, part of the cost, but we want to keep you as part of the community. We want to still be your support system. You have a job, but you don't have a car. Now you've got a car, now you've got transportation. All right, now you're ready to go out and get an apartment. So you've got a job, you've got a car, you've got housing. All right, you're ready to go, you're ready to move out on your own. But you know what? You can still come back because we want to share your success story with people who are just coming into the program. All right. Now you look at this and what you're proposing costs more money. And the reality is what we're not looking at is the lifetime cost. Okay, so these people who are kind of circling in and out of all the different programs might be on these benefits 10, 15, 20 years. Some of them the remainder of their life. All right.
I'd like to try to get a couple more questions.
Okay, so that'll bring the cost down overall when you turn them into productive citizens, who are on the backside of the treatment, and they're now, they're gainfully employed. Look, they're happy. They're better off. Their life is better, first and foremost. But now they're contributing.
Chris?
A lot of the Democrats who have come in for obvious political reasons have made a point of leveling attacks against President Trump. What is your impression of the president as a member of his own political party, and how would you try to work with him, given that polls show even among independents in the district he's not all that popular?
Sure. Look, I look at this as a job interview. Okay. So, and the hiring manager is the people of the 3rd district. So I have to impress upon them that I'm the best person for this job. The House of Representatives was designed by the founders as the people's house. Okay, the job of the representative is to represent the will of the people and to be the closest level of federal government to the folks, and that's what I'm going to provide. That being said, to the question, if the president proposes something that I think is good for the people of the 3rd district, I will be its biggest champion. And if he proposes something that I think goes against the interests of the people of the 3rd district, then I'll call him out and say, look, this doesn't work. This doesn't work for my constituents. It doesn't work for my district. But I can say the same thing about our governor. If the governor's doing something that I think works for the people of the 3rd district, then I'm going to be able to help the governor. As a member of the majority. Sometimes people joke, you'll be the senior member of the majority party down there. I was like, well, because I might be the only member of the majority party. But literally the day I take the oath of office, I'm going to have that ability to speak with the Speaker of the House, to talk with members of the administration, not as someone from the opposition party, but as someone from the same party, and try and bring them together and try and get things done. And that's how you get things done.
How would you assess the president's job performance? And you could address the governors too. If you had to, on the president's scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the highest, 1 being the lowest, where would you put him on that scale?
From the point of view of a constituent of the 3rd district business job, yeah, as myself. His policies, I think, by and large, I support most of his policies. I think they've been good for the people. The tax cut, his talk on trade, we didn't get into foreign policy, but the fact that he's taken some hard, again, as a businessman, I see what he does his negotiating style is he takes an extreme position, in order to bring people his way. But again,
So would you give him a 10?
put aside, I don't give anybody a 10. So
Well, would you give him a 9?
on policy, I give him an 8. On communication style, I give him a 2. I think there's a lot to be said about how you communicate things, how you work with people, how you bring people together. That's his short suit. I mean, he doesn't do that well. That's not who I am. I bring people together. I'm a problem solver. I know how to fix things, and I can complement.
And what about the governor, who likes to fix stuff?
The governor's fan. The governor gets a 9,
Oh.
and again, only because I don't give out 10s. The governor's great. He's a friend. He's a problem solver. He knows how to work with people. I think he does a good job. He studies problems, and he sticks to what he knows he can get done, and he does it.
Just one more question for me. I mean, where do you fit in on the social spectrum? I mean, gay marriage, transgender issues. Just in your mind, are those things?
Abortion? No.
Those things solved in your mind? If the law of the state and everything. I mean, how do you look upon those? You're going to Congress. That always seems to come up. Lately, it hasn't, which is a good thing. But anyway.
Yeah, I hear none of that on the campaign trail. I mean, we're running our campaign on jobs, infrastructure, and dealing with the opiate crisis. I mean, in terms of social issues, the opiate crisis it's number 1, 2, and 3. I don't look to make those a big part of my campaign.
But what are your views on them? Not to step on my boss's toes, but I think he was asking, what are your views on those issues?
Again, look, I'm a states' rights guy. I believe in leaving stuff to the states in general. There's nothing specific right now before Congress, that I think impacts people. Again, at the general level, I like to keep the government out of people's wallets and bedrooms. The government has no business in my marriage. They don't have a business in anybody's marriage. Speaking specifically to the federal government. But again, specifically in how I'm dealing with them on the campaign trail, they're not coming up, and we're not talking about those. I don't see those issues even in the top 5 or 10 of what folks in the 3rd district are really interested in.
If you have a job opening and the best and the brightest candidate for that job is a transgender individual, would you hire that person at your company?
Absolutely. Because the reality is, how would I know? Because I'm not going to ask. The fact is, my company abides by all the laws in the state of Massachusetts. I have lots of employees of all different stripes and however you want. And the fact is, I don't care. It's about the job they do and are they.
Answer my question.
Yeah, there it is. It took a couple shots, but
I've got one more I want to ask about.
One more question about the Fiscal Alliance.
Yeah, I want to ask about the Mass Fiscal Alliance. I think that the court case is still ongoing about disclosing the alliance's donors for its communications. What are your thoughts on that?
As the founder of the Mass Fiscal
Alliance. As the
Alliance.
founder, and what is your argument for why the Fiscal Alliance should not be required to disclose its donors, like, say, a federal super PAC would?
Okay, so there never was a court case against the Mass Fiscal Alliance.
Court case against might be sloppy phrasing.
There was never a court case, so
that question is being decided judicially, which I think is a better way of phrasing that. Not that there was a court case against the Fiscal Alliance.
And everything has, to my knowledge, and again, I haven't worked with the alliance since I started the campaign. But at the point when I left, last year, everything had been decided in the alliance's favor, 100%. To the specific question of disclosure. Look, the federal government, the government has, private citizens have a right to know what their government is doing. That's disclosure, all right? When the government starts digging into what private citizens are doing, the only reason for that is intimidation. There's a famous Supreme Court case going back to the 1950s for the NAACP, where they wanted to make the state of Alabama, I believe it was, or Mississippi, wanted to make the NAACP release the names of their donors so they could protect them, okay? I mean, when government starts demanding that private citizens turn over their rights with regards to political speech, we're in very dangerous ground in terms of the First Amendment and the government turning into a force of intimidation.
So this is a First Amendment issue in your view?
This is absolutely a First Amendment issue. We have freedom of speech, and political speech is first among all speech, and folks have a right. We have a right of free speech, but also to aggregate and come together for that speech. And yeah, for me, it's sacrosanct.
You got a follow-up with it, Chris?
Yeah, just this kind of ties into a similar question. Part A being, what are your thoughts on the Citizens United Supreme Court case? And part B being, what are your thoughts on the role that money currently plays in politics?
So very, very broad questions. I mean, Citizens United essentially reaffirmed the right of citizens to come together and spend money in support of ideas that they believe in. And so it reaffirmed free speech, as far as I'm concerned. The role of money in politics, look, I hear a lot of folks, some of my opposition, talking about dark money. Let's be clear, the only dark money in politics are the taxes you pay to government, okay? Because it goes into a black hole, never to be seen again. But private citizens, the way they spend their private money, that's their business, all right? And it's very dangerous if we're going to let the government start regulating how private citizens spend their own hard-earned money. And I'd be against it.